Hello there, and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about emotional maturity. Let's take a look.
Let me teach you a thing or two about emotionally immature people who dismiss you. When you're dealing with a person who's extremely emotionally immature, they will punish you for having emotions. They will punish you for caring for them. And not only that, they will rob you of having any constructive conversation that will bring any type of peace to your mind. So you'll notice emotionally immature people fall into the category of people who ghost, people who dismiss you, people who breadcrumb, people who go radio silent. The reason why emotionally immature people always kind of distance themselves and they go, almost ghost on you is because they're unconsciously and subconsciously trying to create a degree of rarity. And what I mean by that is that they know that if they were to give you a constructive conversation, you're going to see right through them. You're going to pick up on the fact that they have no idea what the hell it is that they're doing. So what do they do instead? They will literally ghost you, or they'll go completely radio silent and distance themselves, because they know that when they pull back their energy, it's going to make you ruminate and become obsessed over them. Because it's very natural in human behavior for a person to ruminate and obsess over somebody who completely pulls their energy back. Why? Because you don't feel their energy around. You feel the scarcity and lack of accessibility to their energy. So notice this, every time you deal with an emotionally immature person, they will never give you an actual conversation. They'll never sit down with you and really talk about things. They will pull back their energy because they want you to become obsessed with them, because they have such low self-esteem. They want to feel needed and wanted, but it's never in a healthy way. And this is why they constantly play mind games without even realizing that they play mind games, because they lack the emotional intelligence to really know what it is they're actually doing. So anytime you're dismissed by an emotionally immature person and they pull back their energy, know that they're doing it, number one, because they don't have the emotional capacity to have a conversation with you. And two, they know that if they give you that conversation, you're going to see right through them. So rather than doing that and losing that value, they pull their energy back completely so that you can feel like you lost access to them. Because confident people can face you. Confident people can make a decision and stand by it. But when people are not confident and they're insecure and they're emotionally immature, they're not going to give you a conversation. They're going to ghost you. And they're doing it because they're playing a stupid mind game, thinking that if they take away their accessibility to you, you're going to become more obsessed with them.
The reason emotionally immature people often have toxic relationships in adulthood is because they're trying to get the unmet needs of their childhood met in adult relationships. The problem with that is the unmet needs in their childhood revolve around unconditional love. And often the way we test unconditional love, if we're emotionally immature, is by putting people through the ringer, by emotional abuse, or just being, not the greatest whatever you're supposed to be to them. And so the reason we often have a difficult time navigating emotionally immature people is because they're asking something from us that would be inappropriate to give. Adult relationships should be conditional. Adult relationships should revolve around reciprocity, give and take, kindness. I'm going to be around you through the good times and hard times, but you're going to have to be kind to me and treat me well in order for me to want to make this work. And I think ultimately a healthy relationship in adulthood does not look like a healthy relationship in childhood. A healthy relationship in childhood is one where your parent is unconditionally providing you support regardless of whatever decision you make. Whereas a healthy relationship in adulthood has conditionality to it, because ultimately your actions affect me and my actions affect you. You're allowed to act in your self-interest, but it can only be to a point. And then once that point passes, it's now harming me to maintain that relationship with you.
Something I've noticed when you bring a problem up to an emotionally immature person is they can't actually hear you. And I don't mean in the literal sense. I mean, they can't hear you because hearing you would mean that they have to sit with that discomfort, to sit with the guilt, the shame, that maybe they got something wrong. Because ultimately, emotionally immature people experience it as an attack on them rather than feedback of what actually transpired. So instead of listening to understand, they become defensive. They explain, they justify, they minimize, they turn the conversation back on you. And I don't think it's inherently them trying to hurt you. Ultimately, it's a coping mechanism. They're trying to protect themselves from the painful feelings that will get brought up with this rather than try and understand yours. This is also why explaining your pain over and over and over goes unanswered, ignored, or it seems like they don't hear you. Because ultimately, empathy requires self-awareness. So that person can only acknowledge in you what they are able to acknowledge in themselves. And this is something that was hard for me to grasp, especially growing up, because I always thought conflict was a communication problem. It's not always a communication problem. Sometimes it's a capacity problem. And no amount of explaining can make somebody emotionally available to feelings that they've spent a lifetime trying to avoid. This has been a tough learning curve for me because I always thought communication was the do-all, end-all, be-all. And I'm learning that it's not. It doesn't matter if you know how to communicate. If you have somebody that avoids, if you have somebody that is an avoidant or is dismissive because they avoid their own feelings and they don't want to face themselves, it doesn't matter how well you communicate because it's not going to change the outcome. They are going to do what they do and they're going to be emotionally unavailable and they're going to avoid because that's how they cope and that's how they spent their entire life. Because ultimately, even though they come across self-aware, they come across empathetic, they're none of those things. They're exactly who they show you in the times that communication fails, and that's an avoidant person.
I have the emotional maturity to be with you. I help people just like you in my one-on-one sessions, and I see this happening all the time. If they stonewall you instead of working on repair, if they sidestep accountability to protect their own ego, if they're constantly defensive whenever they're seeing you hurt, if they consistently don't consider you, and if they live their life prioritizing their central nervous system and their needs over yours, and constantly put you in the back seat as if you don't matter. Honey, that is not someone who is emotionally mature. And that is not someone who's done enough work to be in a healthy relationship. You are burning yourself out trying to make this work with someone who has no urge to grow, who is showing you through their actions that they would rather prioritize their own pride and ego rather than work on themselves. And honey, in the end, they're going to choose themselves. Because this is what they have continuously shown you. Can they change? Yes, but only if they choose to change. But if they're showing you every single sign in the book that they have no intention on changing, well, honey, believe them. Don't listen to their words, look at their patterns.
Have you ever snapped at someone after they push you to your breaking point, only for them to turn it around on you? It's called reactive abuse. And it happens when somebody who's been repeatedly manipulated, provoked, mistreated, poked at, finally reacts in a way that's very out of character for them. But then the actual abuser uses your reaction to make you look like you've been the problem the entire time. They'll say things like, see, you're the crazy one, you're the abusive one here, and it's all a tactic for them to shift blame and avoid accountability for their behavior. But let's be clear, your reaction does not make you the abusive one. It's a very human response to being emotionally overwhelmed or being pushed past your limits because you cannot be healthy in an unhealthy environment. This is also one of the most misunderstood dynamics in toxic relationships, and it leaves a lot of victims feeling really guilty or ashamed for how they responded, how they acted in the relationship. You don't need to explain your reaction to somebody who benefited from pushing you there. Your nervous system wasn't lying. This reaction is information, and you're allowed to use that information to choose yourself. And anyone who uses your breaking point as proof that you were the problem was never interested in the truth. They were interested in controlling you.
7 signs you act super emotionally immature, but you think you don't. 1. You react instead of pause, because emotion comes first. reaction later. 2. You take everything personally. Mind you, not everything's about you. 3. You avoid accountability because blame feels easier than ownership. 4. You shut down or explode. There's literally no middle ground in emotional expression. 5. You always need to be right because your ego matters more than understanding. 6. You seek constant validation. Your worth depends on others' reactions. 7. You repeat the same patterns over and over again. Awareness exists, but change doesn't. Emotional immaturity is not about being a bad person, though. It's about patterns that haven't been worked through yet.
I don't like emotionally immature people. The ways I could tell when somebody is emotionally immature is when they avoid accountability. If it's never your fault and it's always somebody else's fault, stay the fuck away from me. If they mess up and suddenly you too sensitive, you do too much, you too dramatic, or you misunderstood, they'll twist shit and twist the story so well that you'll start questioning your own fucking reality. Next, they throw silent tantrums instead of communicating. You're the type of person you don't know how to communicate and you immediately throw silent tantrums. That's a form of manipulation. You'll ask them what's wrong, trying to get an understanding of what's going on in a situation. They'll tell you nothing or don't worry about it. Then they start to act cold, get passive aggressive. Like they want you to read their fucking mind and run behind them, or beg for peace or beg them. Instead of just saying what they feel like a fucking adult. This is a big one. They leave when it's time to grow. You notice when you grow and you elevate and you're dealing with certain people and you question how they acting, they say, oh, this just the way I am. I'll work on it eventually. Things happen. That's life. Deep down, they feel like people will tolerate they mess and they bullshit. They feel like it's no pressure to grow. No reason to grow. Some people just like being the way they are. They repeat toxic patterns and call the shit a personality. Trauma bond, self-sabotage, pick fights when it feels too peaceful. When you point it out, they say, oh, I always been like this. They joke through pain and never go deeper. They've been hurt. They're emotionally unavailable. Instead of healing, they use humor, sex, distraction, or validation to escape. They laugh it off. They never work it out. They lack self-awareness. You tell them how they hurt you or how you felt, they'll say, that's not what I meant. Words are overthinking. They don't listen to understand. Listen to defend themselves. They emotionally dump on you but can't hold space for you. They'll cry, vent, trauma dump, spiral on you like you're their personal fucking therapist. When you need something, oh baby, it's crickets. They ain't got the range, baby. They want the benefits of love, but they don't want the responsibility of it. They want you to heal them, love them, hold them, but they won't do the same for you. They call it love. Really, they just feeding off of you, feeding off your emotional maturity. Emotional maturity to me is spiritual laziness. If you're not willing to change yourself and adapt into yourself to help yourself grow, you got a problem. You can love them, wish them well, but you are not their mother, their savior, or their rehab. Somebody is not reciprocating the same energy that you're giving to them, leave their ass alone. I cannot stand emotionally immature people. Grow the fuck up.
If every time you go to express yourself and share with somebody how something that they have done has negatively impacted you, and they meet you with a debate, an argument, or a fight, that is such a clear indicator that the person that you are in relationship with is not emotionally mature enough to meet you in reality. Because with emotionally mature individuals, they are actually just able to hear you out because they have the ability to hold multiple truths at once. They can hold, this is what happened, this was the experience for me, and this was the experience for the other person. This person is expressing impact. I can hold my intention, and I can also open my ears to hear the impact of my actions. They stay curious. They don't only have the desire to understand you, but also the capacity to understand, and then they seek to understand you. They don't just collapse when they hear that something that they have done has had a negative impact on another person. They don't automatically take it to mean something about them and then something about you. They just hear you out. They are able to stay with, okay, this is all that was true surrounding this one experience that we had, and I want to hear so I can better understand you and also better understand myself and the impact that I have on other people. With an emotionally immature person, it just turns into a fight, most likely because they are debating you on what happened, or they are making your reaction and your experience of what happened as the bad thing, because they struggle so intensely to take responsibility for their actions. Because anytime someone says, hey, something you did actually negatively impacted me. They hear, I'm bad, I'm a bad person, I do bad things, instead of just being like, oh, okay, I'm just a human capable of doing a lot of different things and having a lot of different types of impacts on other people. And this person has taken the time, because they care about me and they value our relationship, they have taken the time to express that something that I have done has negatively impacted them. Okay, let me hear. They don't have the internal capacity. They have not cultivated their internal world well enough, and they do not have a history of taking responsibility for their actions to not turn every time you express yourself into a fight. Like, if you feel that you consistently go to express yourself to somebody else and you're just like, wait, how did my personal expression of my feelings turn into a fight? Like, that is such a clear indicator that the person that you are dealing with is not emotionally mature enough to have a healthy, thriving relationship with them.
Emotional immaturity in men often show up in predictable response patterns when they feel hurt, challenged, or emotionally exposed. These responses are usually defense mechanisms because that man doesn't yet have the emotional tools or the capacity to process his emotions in a healthy way. With that being said, here are 3 of the most common ways emotionally immature men respond. The first one is defensiveness and blame shifting. When confronted with an issue, an emotionally immature man oftentimes protects his ego instead of taking responsibility. Some of these most common behaviors is turning the issue back to the other person, refusing to acknowledge wrongdoing, or making excuses instead of owning their mistake. Instead of saying, I see how that hurts you, he says, you're always complaining and nothing that I ever do is good enough. Admitting fault feels like weakness or failure, so he deflects the blame in order to protect his identity. Number 2, he withdraws or emotionally shuts down. Many emotionally immature men respond to conflict by avoiding it completely. This may look like silent treatment, walking away from conversations, refusing to discuss feelings, or disappearing emotionally during hard moments. Instead of working through the issue, he shuts down and says, I'm not doing this right now. This happens because he may lack the emotional vocabulary or skills to process intense feelings. So avoidance to this type of man feels safer. Number 3, he gets angry and emotionally reactive. Some emotionally immature men default to anger when they feel vulnerable. This may look like raising their voice quickly, becoming easily irritated, turning small issues into big arguments, or using sarcasm, insults, or intimidation. Instead of expressing hurt, he reacts with frustration because he feels attacked. This happens because for most men, anger feels more acceptable than sadness, fear, or insecurity. So those emotions get expressed through aggression. Understand this: if you are dealing with an emotionally immature man, please remember that emotionally immature responses usually come from unhealed wounds, poor emotional modeling growing up from their parents, or lack of emotional training, not necessarily bad intentions.